Well, happy Sunday, everybody. Glad y'all are here today. Doing okay? We're going to start planting people just to encourage the rest of you. So that just happened on its own, but thank you. Hey, real quick, in the church world, like in the calendar, as far as things happen, today is what we call Pentecost. So Pente meaning 50, okay? So it's 50 days after resurrection, or we celebrated Easter, and so we recognize this as the day that the church actually began over 2,000 years ago. So while Christ Church began in January of 2007, we're just part of a long history of the church. So it's kind of significant, even though we're not doing anything special about it. I just want you to be aware, because a lot of people like to know that and celebrate that. So today we're going to conclude the series we've been in, and just real quick, the response to last week, like sitting with my wife, Chris, has been overwhelming. And so most of you have been very positive and encouraging. Appreciate that. Thank you. And when we stepped into the series, I just said from the beginning, hey, I'm doing it a little tentatively because I just know that we got to try something, okay? And there's the risk there to maybe say something that you hear, in a wrong way, or maybe not to do something correctly. And so for the most part, we've just stepped in it together, and y'all have just been very gracious. So thank you for that. And I feel like we're kind of going forward together in all this. And I was like, I wonder if this has been have you enjoyed this? And I was like, no, that's not the right question. The question is, has it been helpful? Do you feel like the series has been helpful? Yeah. Okay. So that combined with the 3 people in first service takes us up to 10. So good. It's been worth the investment for the last 7 weeks, but I know it has. So it has been for me. So next week, as Dan said, kids and students kind of take over. And then just looking ahead, the whole month of June, we're going to spend in one passage, John chapter 15, and just kind of looking at what it's like to just kind of how do we connect with and stay connected to Jesus. So that's kind of looking ahead. So today, all right, we started 6 weeks ago saying, all right, let's just be honest. All right, can we just be honest about mental health, because we haven't always been, and especially in the church. And we took this title, Weeds in My Garden, from a song, especially these lyrics, and we'll throw them up on the screen. As a matter of fact, if you got the app, though, all the notes are in the app, as well as some links today. But I tell you that I'm whole, but I'm still healing. I tell you that I'm happy, but I'm grieving. Thought I was a fighter. I'm still in the fire. But if I'm being honest, I'm not being honest. And here's the line: I'll give you roses, just hoping you don't see the weeds in my garden. And I think that those words resonate with a lot of us, because that's where a lot of us actually find ourselves. And I would at least say, based on the conversations that I have been having, or the things that have been relayed to me from other people, that many of us are actually taking steps now to be honest by coming to terms with, okay, I think I do have some weeds in my garden. Or maybe it's a loved one, okay? We're coming to terms with that. With a past trauma, or we're navigating a diagnosis that we've figured out in the last few weeks, or we're fighting the thoughts in our mind, or some of us would go, okay, I'm literally fighting for my life, and this has been very helpful. And many of us in the past few weeks, I would say, have even taken some courageous steps to start a conversation with some people, or to seek out some help, or to actually move towards some healing. And I purposefully started in week number 1 by saying, hey, it's okay to not be okay. And by the way, I review, I think, it's important, and I think it'll be necessary to keep some of this stuff in mind for you going forward. And likely it will actually tell you, what kinds of next steps you should be taking. But it's okay to not be okay, because, the weeds that we have a lot of different kinds of roots. And maybe you haven't thought about that before. Just by way of review, it might be situational, right? Hey, life is happening all around us. You got a work thing, you got a family thing. It might be biological, right? Hey, we're hardwired this way, okay? And the person on your left has a weak heart. The person on your right's got bad knees, and you might be predisposed to anxiety or even depression. Or it could be clinical, right? Or medical. There's something going on in your bodies. There's something out of balance that needs attention. Or it's definitely could be spiritual, right? And you're not walking closely with God right now. You're holding on to, or you're actually hiding something that's having an effect on your emotional and mental state. It might be a consequence, actually, to a sin. The weeds, by the way, are a sign that you're human. but they're actually a sign that something else needs attention. And these are things that Jesus cares deeply about, okay, because he cares deeply about you, which is why the full thought is, okay, it's okay to not be okay, and Jesus wants to make us whole, right? That's why he came. That's what he still does. And sure, that means salvation and forgiveness and grace and relationship with God the Father and discovering what it looks like to live a full life. But it also means that he wants to see us healthy and complete and healed in every possible way, right? Mind, body, heart, and soul. So the series might end today, but your journey towards health and wholeness is going to continue on. So let me just remind you of one thing, and that is the resource page, okay? We put together a page of resources on our website, ChristchurchCamden.com. Right there on the front page, it will take you to all different kinds of things, articles and links and numbers and counselors. And in that list, you'll also see, and if you're in the app, you'll see a link for this as well, that you can join an information list for Celebrate Recovery, okay? Which is a great program. It's a ministry that deals all with your hurts, some of your habits, and a lot of your hang-ups, okay? And so we're just kind of having conversations and trying to make some tentative plans to start a Celebrate Recovery here. So when you get on that list, you'll just be in the loop as far as the communication goes and what's happening. So today I just want to challenge us to actually take a step of commitment. That's what I want us to do in the next few minutes, okay? So when this series started, right, a couple of days before we did the first message, my wife says, hey, we got a letter in the mail, and she lays it out on the counter, and I look at it, and I go, I've seen this before. It's a letter from the HOA, which literally says, too many weeds in your garden. Anybody ever got this one before? I mean, I got like a collection. They're on a notebook now. I got a whole bunch of them, but the point of that is there's a number of responses you can take when you get a letter like that. One, you can go, you know what, it's really not that bad. And who is the person that walks the neighborhood? You ever wondered that before? It's like who is this person? And you go, okay, I'm just going to ignore it. That's one response. I think they should mind their own business. That's usually what I say. And I hope you're not the leader of the HOA in here. Usually I look at it and I go, look, what you're asking is just too difficult. I don't know if I can handle it. Or you can do what my wife says all the time. Look, you got to do something about it. You got to address it. And so that's what we did, okay? And in a similar way, we all have a choice that we're going to have to make here on where we go from here. Because we all have, we may have weeds in our garden, but I really want to encourage you today to kind of get your heart and your mind around this. But we have a good gardener, okay? Like he can kill weeds, he can get rid of weeds, he can even grow things in amongst the weeds. And I truly hope that every single one of us will honestly answer one question today before we leave or before we tune out. And we'll get there in just a minute. So 2 passages I just want us to look at today, John chapter 5 and then in 2 Corinthians. And so while you're finding that or just kind of getting prepared, I want to give you a heads up because here in a minute we're going to hear a story. And some of the content may not be suitable for kids. So if you got kids, I'd scramble and do something with them. Or I might add some of you who have had some military experience and might struggle with PTSD. So I'll set you up again here in a minute when we're ready for that. So John chapter 5, here we go. There's a Jewish festival taking place, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. So somewhere by the sheep gate in Jerusalem, there's this pool called Bethesda. It's got these 5 colonnades, and within these lay a large number of the disabled. There's blind people, lame people, and paralyzed people. So just kind of picture in your mind this pool that's about the size of a football field. And you've got these colonnades or these porches, these overhangs that kind of look out over the water. And there's this local urban legend at the time that an angel would come and visit the pool. And he would actually stir the water up. And so when people saw the water moving, they believed that the first person who would get into the water would be the person that would be healed. Now, we don't know exactly how many people are here, but everybody comes, and probably from lots of different places, so it's probably packed, right? And people are just sitting, and they're waiting, and they're watching. Jesus walks into the pool, picks one guy, and he starts a conversation. Verse 5, one man was there. He'd been disabled for 38 years. And when Jesus saw him lying there and realized he had already been there a long time, he said to him, hey, do you want to get well? Now, we don't know much of what they talk about, but Jesus asked this question, and it is the question that I want all of us to be able to answer for ourselves today before we leave. Do you want to get well? Like, really, is that what you want? Do you want to get well? Now, the answer seems obvious, right? Like, you hear someone ask that question, you go, okay, do I really need to answer that one? It's like saying to your 3-year-old, hey, do you want a spanking? Or your choice is, hey, do you want time out? And they go, what? I don't know. Am I supposed to answer that? You're getting ready to head on a summer vacation, right? You're going to get on 75 and you're going north or south or 95, sorry, and you're going to put the cruise control on, whatever you set it out. I'm sure it's going to be 75, and there's commotion in the back seat, right? And you're just wildly swinging at whatever's back there because I cannot break cruise. We're on a mission. We got to get there, right? At least that's how I remember it. Hey, do you want me to come back there? Yes, I'd like to see that. I don't know. What am I supposed to say? Do you want me to pull this car over? Yes? No? The answer we think is obvious, okay? So you picture what it's like for this guy in the first century. He lives on a mat that's like 3 feet by 6 feet. It's like a yoga mat, right? Someone's got to feed him. Someone's got to carry him. Someone's got to clothe him. Someone's got to move him, roll him over to prevent bed sores. Someone's got to change him, when he makes a mess. And he doesn't know independence. He can't really contribute to society or work. He literally just sits and he begs. He has little influence in the world. He not much of a future, right? And so you imagine, laying by the pool day after day, and you're so close to what you believe is actually the solution to being well, but you're not able to actually do anything about it. And, don't miss this, and we always have to mention this when we're talking about healing or disease or sickness or a guy who's like this, he's suffering from a stigma in the ancient world where people believed that if there was anything wrong in your life, right, if you're lame, you must have done something to actually bring it on yourself, right? You must have committed a sin by which this happened. Hey, you're this way because you did something wrong. And maybe some of us have heard that before, and it could be we felt that when it comes to mental health. And the question, it just almost seems a little insensitive, right? But I kind of understand Jesus to be saying, hey, would you like to get well? Is that what you really want? Like, is that really what you want? You want to be well. And he answers, verse 7, Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. Because while I'm coming, someone goes down ahead of me. Now, instead of saying, okay, yes, of course, or hey, would you mind helping me? He's making excuses. How many of you know, by the way, that some people who say they can't get well really mean they won't get well or don't want to get well? See, not every sick person actually wants to get better. Now, I always hypothesize, and I ask a lot of what ifs, and I'm going to do that in this passage because what if he's actually looking for reasons to not get well? You say, well, why would you do that? I don't know, but about once every spring, I'll wake up with a sore throat that goes from my ears all the way down, deep into my chest, and I'll complain about it, and every day I'll come home and I'll say to my wife, wow, I need to go see a doctor, and she'll say, have you made an appointment? And I'll say, no. And she'll say, why not? And we go back and forth. Here's why, okay? And some of us will understand this. Because there's a part of me that likes being sick. Man, if I'm sick for one more day, I get to skip a test, I get to, call out from work, I get to stay at home, I get to watch movies. If I get well, I don't get sympathy anymore, I'm not getting gift cards, no one helps me, you start to forget about me. Hey, it's not an ideal life, but it's a very comfortable life. He's taken care of, right? People are sympathetic to him. Some people, like after long periods of sickness, lose the will to actually get better. And we start to think, you know what? Things are just never going to change, are they? And after 38 years, and who knows how long he's actually been laying around the pool, maybe he starts to believe that it's just always going to be like this. So instead of jumping in and saying, yes, please, why would I even come here? Hey, I know you're Jesus, but that's kind of a dumb question. He starts to make excuses like, I tried and I can't. Now, this is just me, my belief here. I think there's maybe an outside shot that in part of the conversation, this guy indicates, yeah, well, of course I want to get well, but I don't have any help. That's just my belief based on the way Jesus steps in verse 8. Jesus tells him three things. Get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And instantly the man got well, picked up his mat, and started to walk. Now, again, Jesus gives these three instructions. One, get up, okay? You've been healed. Maybe you don't actually know it yet, but if you stand up, you'll realize it. Get your stuff together, okay? Everything you own, it's probably sitting right there. Take it with you because you are not coming back to this place again, and walk. Start to actually take a step because there's action that's actually required on your part to start moving in a whole new direction. Now, a couple of things to be clear on, okay? And I feel like we got to say these things every time we talk about healing, but the healing doesn't seem, okay, in this instance, to be tied to his faith. Jesus doesn't say, hey, do you believe I can do this, and then wait for his answer. The healing doesn't even seem to be tied to his obedience, right? He's actually healed first, and then he does what Jesus says, meaning, okay, I think he's healed, like period. And he could continue to lay by the pool for as long as he wants and actually not realize it. But he does have to do this one thing. He has to walk out. He's got to walk out on his own. He has to believe it's possible to get up, to walk out in clear view of everybody else who's there so that the healing is realized. Now, the point of the story, okay, is not that Jesus might heal you even if you tell him no. I mean, he might, but that's not really the point of the story. If you're actually to read a little bit further, you would see that not everyone is actually excited when you get well. You ever realized that before? See, there are religious people who completely overlook the healing that's taken place, and they complain about the fact that Jesus broke a rule. See, he did this healing, it says, on the Sabbath. Healing's on the list. Can't do that on the Sabbath. Carrying your sleeping bag, can't do that either. What we know about Jesus is that he doesn't always play by the rules. Jesus makes the rules. See, I think Jesus does the healing, okay, you ready for this? And I could be wrong, just because he can, right? To actually prove who he was. It's what we see with other healings like in his ministry. The physical healings are always the setup to talk about spiritual healing. In other words, he's always saying, look, if I can do this right here, if I can do this thing, if I can heal his legs, if I can give you back your sight, if I can give you back your hearing, if I can even bring that person back to life again, if I do that, surely you'd see that I have the power to forgive and save. Hey, a person's physical, or we could even say mental or emotional state, was always a representation of what life looks like without Jesus reaching down and touching your mind, your heart, your body, and your soul. What made this man healthy, right? What is it that actually made him well? You know, sometimes Jesus encounters a person and he makes it clear, okay, it was their faith that made them well. Someone comes to Jesus, right, in desperation. They kind of throw themselves at him. They beg for mercy and healing, and Jesus does it. Hey, you have shown great faith. I'm gonna grant that request. This time, Jesus is the one who comes to the man, and we don't even know how much faith he has. It's Jesus who forces the issue. So here's another maybe. Maybe this man's part in faith is to simply believe he has already been healed, and then to start living in that new reality. And I can't guarantee, right, the same result for you, but you still have to answer the same question as he did. Do you want to get well? Like, really, is that what you want? Do you want to get well? Specifically, when we're talking about mental health, is that what you really want? To get well? Now, one answer that some of us will have is, actually, no, I'm good. And you will continue to repeat it, right? Whatever this thing is that I've been carrying or I've been dealing with or has been going on in my life for the last 38 years or maybe 38 days, you know what? I'm fine. I'm just going to keep repeating it. And we'll tell ourselves, okay, it's not ideal, but we're comfortable this way. I mean, it is amazing how easy it is to become comfortable with not being well. Hey, I don't want to get over the debilitating bitterness, right? I mean, it's the ace of spades. I'm going to hold on to it as long as I can. I know my anger's killing me, but I bet it tastes better than forgiveness, right? I'm sure a non-anxious life might be better, but I don't want to give up control, right? I don't really want to be made whole by Jesus because this is the life I know, and I've gotten along okay so far. Or some of us, okay, we're just believing things are never going to change. It's been this way for a long time. It's probably going to be this way going forward. Or maybe it's easier to blame other people for why we can't get better, or believe the problem's just too big, or to come up with reasons on why we can't get better. And again, we often say, I can't, when what we mean is, I won't or I don't want to. And it's not the best place to live, but there's something satisfying for some of us about this place. Do you want to get well? No. Which just means you're going to keep repeating the same things over and over. But I hope a whole bunch of us would actually go, okay, do you want to get well? Well, yes, of course, yes. Then the action here is to say, all right, I can release it. All right, I'm going to release it. Okay, God, I don't want to carry this anymore. Please take it. And it could be that something's not working right in your body, right? It betrayed you. It turned against you. It's a memory. It's a trauma. It's forgiveness. Addiction, fear, right? Depression, anxiety, stress, the thoughts, what's going on in my head, the desire to live, or it's this sickness I recognize called sin, okay? But maybe you've actually come to that point where everything else you've tried, it hasn't worked. Or it hasn't worked enough, or it hasn't worked completely. And what I'm challenging you to do today is to actually release it to God, where you say, okay, I know that something has to change. Yes, I want to be well. I want to be healed. I want to be free, right? And I don't know how big your issue is, and I don't know how bad it's been, and I don't know how long it's been going on. I know God can. Okay, I know God can. That Jesus actually has the power to reach down and heal, and he has the power to give us the ability to rise so that now we can actually walk into what's next. So, listen, if you want to break free from depression, okay, Jesus, you can. If you want to move past anxiety, Jesus, you can. Jesus, I want you to do a work in my life and heal this thing and heal me. You can. Now, releasing the thing to Jesus doesn't mean he's obligated to heal it. It just means that you're handing it to him and you're asking him to do what he wants to do. Okay, you're saying, okay, Jesus, I'm going to take this out of my control and I'm going to hand it over and place it in your control. So you can keep repeating what you're doing, or you can release it to Jesus. And when you do, one of two things is going to happen. Okay, it's out of my hands. I'm releasing it to Jesus. One of two things are going to happen. One, God will sometimes remove it. Right? You might offer up the most sincere prayer even today in the next few minutes, and you're like, oh man, I'm going in one more time, and I don't want to be a hostage to this. I don't want to be captive to this fear. I don't want to live in this prison anymore. And then you walk out that door and you go sit in your car and you go, you know what? I can't explain it, but it feels like it's gone. Like that might happen for you. Or he might use a long history of prayer, right? Or immersing yourself in Scripture, or being surrounded by some other people, like in this room or this church, in a loving community. Or God might choose to remove it through the work of a doctor or the guidance of a counselor. Or one more prayer, okay, where God says, okay, oh, this is the prayer I'm going to answer. And maybe that's how God chooses to remove it from you. And listen, I get it, because this is exactly what my wife said last week, right? You're probably thinking, I've prayed this so many times. I was just kind of reminded last night about the Old Testament story of Elijah, which we touched on several weeks ago. And there's a moment towards the end of his story where he prays several times that God would actually send rain, and God doesn't answer that prayer. And then it specifically says, on the seventh time. On the seventh time he prayed, and that's when God chose to act. You just never know. So sometimes we release it to God and he removes it. But listen, God will always redeem it. He will always redeem it. And maybe you've released it to him. Okay, it's out of my control. Would you do something with this? And it's not entirely gone from your life, but you can see something good in it, or you're believing that something good will come from it. This might be news to some of us who are new to Jesus or Bible study, but Jesus actually didn't heal everybody who had a problem in the first century. And we learn some crucial stuff, I think, from a follower of Jesus named Paul in the 2 Corinthians passage, where he says, hey, a thorn in the flesh was given to me. He calls it a messenger of Satan to torment me so I would stay humble and not exalt myself. He goes, look, I pled with the Lord 3 times that it would leave me. He's saying, okay, I released it to God. I asked him to remove it, and he didn't remove it. But here's what he did. He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is perfected in weakness. Okay, so here's what I'm doing. I will gladly boast all the more about that weakness so that Christ's power may reside in me. So I even take pleasure in weakness. Could be an insult, a hardship, a persecution, all the difficulties. For when I am weak, then I'm strong. Hey, in the midst of the weeds, okay, that are growing up all around me, or this period of weakness, or he says in the middle of hardship or difficult situations, or living out the things that I thought would like already be over with, in that moment, or you say in this season or through this life, he said, my weakness is an invitation for the power of God to show up. Right? Because the grace and the power of Jesus is running through me because I have released this thing into his hands. And I think that right there makes how he started the letter even more powerful, all the way back in chapter 1 where he says, blessed be the God, Father, and Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies, the God of all comfort. He comforts us in all of our affliction so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any kind of affliction through the comfort we ourselves receive from God. He's saying, listen, if you have any kind of difficulty that you are carrying through your life or have had to walk through, first, just know that God cares about that and that he's there to comfort you. And he does that. Okay, yeah, he cares and comforts, but the primary reason and purpose is that you can encourage someone else who is actually walking through a very similar thing. Listen, when you look at what you've been through in your life, right, and how God has maybe even carried you to this point, you can then give people around you who need it some hope. Otherwise, like, what a waste of time or tears, really, that all of your sorrows have been, right, if they don't result in others who are afflicted being able to hear how God has helped you. So, how can my sorrows or your struggles actually be part of healing the world? How could your pain really launch you into someone's life rather than into isolation and maybe self-pity? So maybe, okay, and just hear me out on this one, maybe God doesn't remove the struggle from your life, rather he will redeem it, okay, so that your trouble and your trauma can be part of your testimony. Okay, maybe he doesn't remove it, he will redeem it so that your pain will actually be the beginning of what you proclaim, right? Your struggle could actually become the key to your story. Your hurt would actually bring someone else some healing. So maybe it's not, okay, how do I get out of this? But okay, what might God bring out of this? Because listen, you know that if you've been broken down in your life before, and yet you've been held in the hands of God, like you're perfectly set up to help someone else who's broken. And God can use your past problems and he can use your present pain for you to comfort someone else. And you just kind of roll up on side of them and go, okay, listen, I get it. I have been there. But let me tell you what Jesus is doing in my life. I mean, how crazy to think that God doesn't remove the weeds, some of them, because he wants to use the weeds so that someone else doesn't lose hope and give up. Hey, the prayer is, okay, God, I want you to remove it. That's a prayer, and I think you should pray it boldly. But if you're not or you don't, then redeem it, and maybe I can help someone else. Maybe they would even come to know you because of this. So I said we're going to hear a story that I think touches on so much of where we've been the last 6 weeks. And when we say we want to be honest, I'm going to call this super honest, okay? And it might be a little too much for some of us. And so fair warning that it's a little, I don't know, other descriptive. How about that? Maybe graphic, but it's real. And I think it shows the power of what God can do when we release it to him. So check this out.
Hi, my name's Dustin. This is my story. I actually, senior year, decided I want to join the Marine Corps, and I was so bad the Marine Corps recruiter said, we can't even take you unless you get your grades up. So that was my motivation, was to do what I needed to do in order to join the Marine Corps. So I joined right out of high school. I left for boot camp 2 weeks after I graduated. Got stationed in DC, and I was there for 9/11. That was kind of the big turning point in my life, as I actually watched the plane hit the Pentagon. War is all I came to know and know for my whole career. I deployed several times, Iraq, Afghanistan, fought in 2 wars, was wounded overseas. I kind of got the full experience of war. 2005, deployed to Iraq, and at that time I didn't know Christ. I wasn't saved. A suspected insurgent had killed 4 of our people, and we were tasked with doing a helicopter raid on the house that he was allegedly in. But I made the conscious decision to kill him, and I think what really stuck out with me was the family was there. The children and the wife were there. The fact that I still took his life in front of his family is something that stuck with me, and it's something I really had a hard time with over the years. Fast forward to 2010, that's when I gave my life to Christ, and I knew he had forgiven me for everything I had ever done in my life, but the issue I had was I couldn't forgive myself. And I continued on with my career. I deployed more, and then finally came to retirement, and I retired from the Marine Corps. And everything seemed pretty well. I got a job on base. Early 2021 is kind of when my battle with PTSD, and this is just kind of war altogether, had caught up with me. I went to the VA for help. They put me on some medications, and I think that really did a disservice to the PTSD. It made things a lot harder, and I lost the will to live. I had actually put a gun to my head twice and started pulling the trigger. But as I did it, each time, an image of my kids and my wife at the time flashed through my mind. And it was because of that I couldn't. And I knew I needed help. Luckily, I was put in touch with a friend of mine. I think the biggest thing that stuck out that he told me is he had gone to the VA hospital, to the mental health ward, and he got in the elevator with a Korean War veteran, and that Korean War veteran told him, "Son, you're not going to find what you're looking for up there." He said, "You're going to have good days, and you're going to have bad days, but just keep making sure you're having days." And I just kept doing that, and I kept doing that until I learned to forgive myself for what happened in 2005. And I did, and I truly forgave myself, and I healed. And the thought of suicide has never crossed my mind ever again. And in late 2021, my wife at the time began having an affair. Through that struggle, I prayed. I ran to God. I ran to him immediately. And I remember standing out in my driveway one night talking to him. And I don't hear God audibly, but as I prayed to him to fix this for me, I felt his words essentially just kind of roll over my body, saying, "Do you remember that grace and forgiveness and compassion and love that I gave you through Jesus?" And I kind of remember nodding and saying, "Yep." He said, "Well, go ahead and give that to her." And man, that was a hard pill to swallow, but I said, okay. And the next day I reached out to her and I told her that through everything, I forgive you. I think it was January 2022, and I finally knew it was time that I had to pursue divorce. And so the divorce happened by March of 2022. We were set to appear in court on January 12th of 2023. She had finally agreed and signed the modified divorce papers on the 11th. And on the 12th, she took her own life. So that brought me to the hardest thing I've ever had to do, and tell my children that their mom died. You know, and we're still healing. The hurt doesn't ever completely go away. But you just got to seek help where it's needed. Continue to stay engaged with people. Surround yourself by people that love God and love you. Lean on them. And forgive, whether it's other people that have done you wrong or something you've done wrong yourself. Just forgive. I've found through this entire journey that I would not have gotten through anything that I've been through without forgiveness, because through forgiveness I found absolute peace. I suggested to John that we dig back in the musical archives a little bit, and maybe during the series we play Cry Out to Jesus by Third Day. I would recommend you go read the lyrics of that, but I think especially for this series and mental health and struggle and pain, the things that every one of us go through in this world. We all have pain, we all have hurt. That song has been my anthem for years, through times in war to all the things I went through in 2021, 22, and even 23 into 24. I love singing that song, I love playing that song, but the lyrics of that song and just crying out to Jesus, no matter what you're going through, what you've been through, I have hung on that song and listened to it on repeat for all these years.
To everyone who's lost someone they love long before it was their time, and feel like the days you had were not enough when you said goodbye. And to all of the people with burdens and pains keeping you back from your life, you believe that there's nothing and there is no one who can make it right. There is hope for the helpless, rest for the weary, love for the broken hearts. There is grace and forgiveness, mercy and healing, meet you wherever you are. Cry out to Jesus. Cry out to Jesus. For the marriage that's struggling just to hang on, they've lost all of their faith and love, and they've done all they can to make it right again. Still it's not enough. For the ones who can't break the addictions and chains, you try to give up but you come back again. Just remember that you're not alone in your shame and your suffering. There is hope for the helpless, rest for the weary, love for the broken heart. There is grace and forgiveness, mercy and healing, wiping the tears from her eyes. For the children around the world without a home, say a prayer tonight. There is hope for the helpless, rest for the weary, love for the broken heart. There is grace and forgiveness, mercy and healing to meet you wherever you are. There is hope for the helpless and rest for the weary and love for the broken heart. There is grace and forgiveness, mercy and healing to meet you wherever you are. Cry out to Jesus. Cry out to Jesus. Cry out to Jesus. Cry out to Jesus.
Hey, you can have a seat. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. You were going to be disappointed if we didn't have him sing that song, weren't you? And you didn't even know it. Hey, you know, we're not all going through the same thing, but we're going through something. And so you should have been given a weed. That's what these are. You can buy them on Amazon if you like them. You should have been given one when you came in. If not, just raise your hand. I want to make sure you get one. Because I want to ask you to do something with it today on your way out as an act of releasing something to God. So you maybe saw some in the lobby already. There's a shelf out there. Some of you were so confused because your coffee got moved and it's ruined your morning, but there's a shelf out there with some planters on it, and there are already some weeds sticking in it. But we'd love to invite you to write on this this card here. There's pens in front of you. You can just do it here in the next minute. But two things. On one side, we're going to write down what we're letting go of. On the other side, we're going to write down a person that we're lifting up, okay? So is there something that you need to let go of as a result of the last few weeks as we've been being honest about mental health? And so it might be a guilt, it might be a shame, it might be a past trauma, it might be a depression, anxiety, stress, whatever. What is it that you need to let go of? And it might be, you know what, I've pulled this weed 100 times before. I'm gonna write it down one more time. And just as an act of releasing it to God, okay, we're gonna drop it in that planter and we're gonna walk out the door and we're gonna say, okay, God, can you do something with this? I'm asking you to remove it. If not, will you redeem it and help me tell a better story to someone else who needs encouragement and hope? So one side, I'm letting go of something. I want to release this. On the other side, maybe you would write down the name of a person. And if you're like, I'm not comfortable with that, some initials, a descriptor, okay? Someone that you have observed or you know is struggling, and you just want to lift them up and say, okay, I think if they could get in front of Jesus or if they could release this to Jesus, he could do an amazing work in their life. So you're praying for them on your way out as well. So I'm going to let go of this. I'm going to lift up this person. And then when you walk out, just, stick it in the planter and say, okay, it is an act of me. I'm taking a step to release this. That's it. Would you just say this with me and give it your best voice? I may have weeds, but I have a good gardener. Yeah, you're stronger on the weeds, not so much the gardener, but it's true, it's true. I want to pray for us this morning as you consider taking these steps today. God, this morning we just pray, and I'm just going to pray on behalf of everybody in the room and watching. God, we're asking you to remove these things from us. God, we're asking you to remove these weeds from our mind. God, remove the ones that are stuck in our heart. God, no matter what that is, whether it's things we've talked about and trauma and depression and God, even the thoughts that lead us to want to harm ourselves, God, would you remove that? God, would you come in and do a renovation of our minds and our hearts? And God, maybe it's the anxiety. I don't know what it is, God, but we're asking you to remove these things from us. We want to be well. We want to be healthy. We want to be whole. And we're asking you to do that. We're believing that you can do that. God, if you should choose for whatever reason to not remove it, we ask that you redeem it. God, would you allow our story to encourage someone else's struggles? God, would you allow what we've been through to provide hope for others who are going through the same thing? God, could we tell a greater and better story about you and how you have carried us to this point for other people? So God, today, that's our prayer. God, we thank you that you are indeed a good gardener. God, we're trusting in you for what we need today, and we're releasing these things into your control. And we pray them in the name of Jesus. Amen.